Hey folks, it's Crypto Hustle, and I'm just going to do a quick market analysis on Tezos. We're going to look at the charts, we're going to look at recent events, fundamentals, my own personal strategy. So, this isn't financial advice. These are just my own personal opinions. You have to conduct your own due diligence. Don't just blindly copy somebody. Everyone's got to have their own plan. If you don't have a plan and don't know what you're doing, then it's probably best to stay out of the market. So, looking at the Tezos charts, I'm using Bitfinex predominantly because this is where true price discovery happened on Tezos. There was some charts on HitBTC prior to the opening of the network, but this is all fake. These were just IOU tokens. There was no real supply and demand. You couldn't withdraw, you couldn't deposit. The network was not live, and therefore this is not real price discovery. So Bitfinex was one of the first exchanges to have real price discovery where you could withdraw and deposit Tezos once the network went live. So you can see here you had the initial exchange crash. Oftentimes when coins get listed on exchange, because the order books are fairly thin, they tend to crash, consolidated a little bit, but then it pretty much capitulated when Bitcoin broke down, capitulated from that descending triangle at 6K. Now this wasn't unique to Tezos. Pretty much all altcoins capitulated at the same time as a result of market correlation. Also due to market correlation, many altcoins went through an accumulation phase right at the lows once they found support. So you can see Tezos kind of found accumulation right around the ICO price. The ICO price was around 40 to 50 cents depending on when you got into it. Let's just fix that a little bit. All right. So after this, once we had the breakout out of this accumulation phase, we pretty much had a ramp up. There was a lot of bullish news around STO, stuff like this. I call this entire area right here the phase one of the bull trend, right? So it came up into this resistance up here, sold off. It's been a choppy, slow grind down, just pretty much consolidating. You can see that there are 3 points of contact on a descending trend line right now. So this is an important line to be watching moving forward. If we use a fib retracement, we can see that this market had a retracement all the way down between the 0.61 and 0.78 retracement zone. This is fairly typical retracement zone for altcoins, especially ones that don't have a lot of liquidity necessarily, that are still in price discovery. Initially, when Tezos came out, I was telling people in my group that any good projects will not have to pay for exchange listings. So what we've been seeing all throughout the year are multiple exchanges listing Tezos organically without necessarily having to get paid for it. Usually projects that have to pay for exchange listings are just, centralized tokens that probably like IOU of a network that they want to launch or something like that. But anything that's a top quality project isn't going to have to pay for listings. So right here, we can see that the market kind of popped off on the Coinbase listing news, and recently we had some bullish news around Coinbase listing Tezos as an option for staking. So you can get 5% returns by having Tezos in your wallet. I personally think that's fairly bullish moving forward. It's estimated that Coinbase has about 30 million users. They tend to be the go-to place for new entrants, new participants coming into the ecosystem. And if somebody comes in and they're completely new, they'll probably see the high price of Bitcoin and think to themselves, all right, that's a little bit expensive, might only be able to buy a fraction of that. They'll look at the other altcoins, and then psychologically, they might see Tezos as a cheap option that's actually giving them 5% returns. As far as I know right now, it is the only altcoin that Coinbase has actually giving any type of annual percentage returns. Now, 5% isn't as much as you would get if you were staking it on your own, but they're taking a fee for the ease and convenience of it. So, my own personal plan, strategy, for anyone who's been following me, it's no surprise that I've been accumulating Tezos. Tezos is currently my #1 largest altcoin position. It will continue to be so in this market cycle. Bitcoin is also one of my largest positions. So those are my two positions, Bitcoin and Tezos. Personally, myself, there's a couple of reasons why I went with Tezos over other markets. #1, I was looking for a project that offered something different to the ecosystem as far as the fundamentals are concerned. We'll get into that in a little bit. And #2, I wanted to be an early adopter on a new project. There's a lot of older projects that have been around in the previous market cycles. Some of them have actually gone through a few market cycles already, such as Litecoin. Personally, myself, from my own experience in the crypto markets, I find that one could actually maximize their gains by getting in on the ground floor as an early adopter of the next big thing. So I personally would prefer doing that versus buying someone else's sloppy table scraps and eating them off of the floor, right? A lot of other altcoins have had a huge market cycle, have gone parabolic with Bitcoin, have crashed. A lot of new participants who came in at the end of 2017 have been bag holders or have, rage quit and capitulated on a lot of those coins. What that means is that when there's a lot of bag holders, there's a lot of resistance to move through. Now, it's not to say that Tezos is going to gain exclusively in the crypto markets. As we all know, altcoins tend to be fairly correlated to Bitcoin's market cycles, and Bitcoin is currently in a bull trend. Obviously, if Bitcoin breaks out of an all-time high, we're likely going to see all ships rise with the tides like we saw in the previous cycle. But I'm basically just going for a home run play on this, which is why it's my largest position. It also gives me the added benefit of 7% returns a year of staking by just holding it. So it actually pays to hold. So as far as my own personal investment strategy on this, I participated in the ICO. When it launched on Bitfinex, I purchased some more up through here. I averaged down during capitulation, and I also bought some during the accumulation phase. And pretty much that was my accumulation play. I went in fairly heavy, and I've just been riding it since and being patient. So I'm going for the home run play. I'm not interested in smaller moves. I'm minimizing my paperwork, and there's other markets. If I want to go for shorter swings, there are other markets that I'm playing with, but this is pretty much an investment / position trade, going for the home run on this market cycle. Looking over at the BTC charts, we can kind of see a bit of a fractal playing out. So we can see that it looks like there's another accumulation pattern on the BTC charts. In order for the markets to show a true alt season, the price has to gain on both the BTC as well as the USD charts, right? So there has to be confluence between those two. We could see a lot of resistance in through here. We're testing that resistance point right now. When we break out of that resistance, this possibility will come up and retest these higher levels up in through here. And then obviously when we break that, it's price discovery to the upside. But you can kind of see there's like a sell-off, a bounce, retracement, bounce, slow grind, bounce, slow grind, and then breakout. And you have kind of the same type of pattern that's been playing out. Also, a lot of volume across the board. For Kraken, for example, we saw some of the highest volume, one of the highest volume candles on Coinbase GDAX, we saw the highest volume across the board. I think even on Binance, we saw the highest volume. I think we had a volume rate here of around $90 million. It's cooled off a bit as we're consolidating. Possible that we might retrace, but if we break out of this area, then we'll likely pick up a bit of momentum. So I'm just going to get into a couple of the fundamentals around Tezos and some of the reasons why I think it offers a unique value proposition. So there are three unique value propositions that Tezos is bringing to the blockchain space. And it's actually solving a couple of problems that we've seen in this space. Number one is on-chain governance, right? When we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about an autonomous financial system that's supposed to be self-governing. However, where there tends to be a bit of an Achilles heel is around development, right? You can have decentralization and checks and balances between developers, nodes, as well as miners. However, oftentimes development is usually just a small group of people who can actually arbitrarily change the decisions. One prime example of a governance failure that we've seen was in Ethereum in 2016 around the DAO hack. There was a smart contract which was a decentralized autonomous organization where people pooled their funds in it. And, its main value proposition was immutable smart contracts, including Ethereum, right? This was advertised on their website. This was advertised in the DAO website. And basically a hacker came and exploited the code and was draining out the funds. So what happened was they basically rewrote the state of the blockchain and hard forked it as if the hack never happened. Now, the big problem with that is they pretty much reneged on their value proposition of immutability, which is the entire purpose of blockchains when you think about it, right? If you can just change the state of transactions willy-nilly, then, what's the point of having a decentralized blockchain? So the immutability is actually a key factor to decentralization. Now, there was no way for community members to be able to vote for that process, to be able to decide if they wanted to do that or not. It was kind of, arbitrarily done by a handful of developers. And so to me, that was a bit of a governance failure. So this kind of changes that, because at the core level of this protocol, you can make on-chain changes at the protocol level through community voting, right? And anybody can make a proposal and also attach an invoice to that proposal, and it's all handled automatically by the protocol. So development can actually be a lot more decentralized than other protocols. So that's kind of a move forward for the blockchain industry. I think that's kind of important. Also, number two is this is a smart contract platform, and it has formal verification in it. They're using a contracting language or programming language called Michelson. And with formal verification, it mathematically ensures the integrity of that smart contract to show that it's free of bugs and glitches, stuff like that. We've already seen, that's number two, we've seen some major debacles around smart contract bugs, including the DAO, so on and so forth. If they had some level of formal verification, perhaps that entire debacle wouldn't have happened. Number three, this isn't necessarily on a protocol level, but because of the on-chain governance and formal verification, we're seeing a lot more STO projects choosing Tezos over Ethereum. Some projects are moving over from Ethereum to Tezos because of those two things. For example, if you're going to do a multi-billion-dollar STO on a blockchain, you probably want to have some say on the governance model. You probably want to be able to vote on it and not have your STO tokens being secured by the faith of a handful of developers. And also just to ensure that your smart contracts are free of bugs. So I'm just going to go into a couple of examples of this that we've seen this year. So we have one project, Elevated Returns. They're planning to tokenize about $1 billion of real estate. They already did an STO around a ski resorts in Aspen for about $18 million. So we're going to see a lot more coming onto Tezos. Also, a major bank, BTG Pactual, they're also going to be launching $1 billion worth of security tokens on the Tezos blockchain as well, and moving over from Ethereum. We see that Tezos has actually partnered with Globacap, and this is like a London-based STO project where they're, that you're able to trade STOs, stuff like that. They're fully licensed and regulated. So this is, a nice strategic partnership. Also, Fundament Group, which is a German-based real estate STO platform. They've done a partnership with them as well. So we're seeing some traction. And then the most recent news is T0. They're partnering up with them as well to tokenize $500 million worth of real estate for, I believe, a condo development in the UK. So you're seeing the Tezos Foundation creating strategic partnerships to try to capture the STO market. For those who don't know, STO is basically a security token. It represents real equity in real estate or a company. This is a step up from the ICO phase. In 2017, we saw a huge ICO craze. Ethereum was the platform used for ICOs. There's tons of ICOs coming out. A lot of them were vaporware garbage. People are just, pumping out white papers left, right, and center, copy and paste, promising the moon, selling a bunch of shitcoin tokens that didn't really give you anything. They had zero revenue model. So a lot of these ICOs that launched before, their only revenue model was basically just dumping their tokens on their retail investors, as well as collecting ETH and perpetually funding development by dumping Ethereum, which has put continuous downward pressure on the ETH market. The SEC has cracked down on ICOs, so we've seen those markets slow down considerably, and it's a lot more difficult and riskier for projects to raise funds. STOs, in my opinion, are a lot more legitimate. Oftentimes, they're going after accredited investors, but then they can be opened up to the retail market, I think, after about a year lockup period, which will provide much needed liquidity to those markets. In my opinion, the STO markets are pretty much where the ICO markets were at about 2015, 2016. Still very new, just starting to get a little bit of traction. A lot of these markets are still liquid, or exchanges are still being built. So still very much in the early adopter phase, but we could see an STO craze. And the difference between an STO and a shitcoin is you do get real equity in real businesses with revenue models or a share of real estate. So you could actually own a fraction of some luxury real estate and be able to get some guaranteed returns on that. And it's also going to tap into a multi-trillion-dollar untapped market right now, because if you want to do a private equity deal, you have to, go out and find a buyer and then do a bunch of paperwork, and it's very old-fashioned, it's very slow, and there's not necessarily liquid markets where you could immediately trade private equity. So by tokenizing private equity, we're actually going to be creating an entire secondary market aside from the current public markets that we have. So, I anticipate that's going to be an actual big movement in crypto moving forward. And if Tezos continues on its momentum, it could actually capture a lot of that market, which is a lot smarter than trying to play the ICO game, washing its hand clean of that garbage, moving forward onto bigger and better things. Now, based on my experience from the previous market cycle, there are some coins that are smaller plays for me, that are shorter term plays, just playing off the swings, so on and so forth. This is more of an investment / position trade for me. I'm basically going for the grand slam and seeing if I can, get in during the accumulation phase as an early adopter and, you know, sell a good chunk of my position during peak parabola. You know, possible price projections. You know, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not some kind of wizard that can predict the future. But if I were to just give an estimate based on, you know, previous markets, crypto markets, and how they behave based on market cap, if Tezos were ever to hit $50, that would be a $33 billion market cap evaluation. I personally think that that's reasonable, especially if we have several multi-billion-dollar STO projects that are using Tezos. We should be seeing a lot of these launch in the first and second quarter of next year. Just to give you an example, at the peak of the previous parabola, the previous market cycle, some market caps, Ethereum was at around $135 billion market cap. Ripple was at $118 billion cap. Bcash was at a $66 billion market cap. Litecoin was at around $19 billion. EOS was about $17 billion. Now, if Bitcoin were to break the all-time high, I personally think that it can hit at least $1 trillion market cap. When you compare it to other markets, you know, we've actually seen stuff like Apple and Amazon, just single companies, hitting $1 trillion market cap. So for an entire ecosystem, an entire new economy, it's not unreasonable to think that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as a whole hasn't reached market saturation and that it could hit multi-trillion-dollar market cap. So if that were to happen, I really don't think it's unreasonable that Tezos would hit $50 or a $33 billion market cap. There will be a core position that I'm always going to keep just to be able to live off of the passive income, the returns. Obviously, as the price is a lot higher, the returns of the 7%, 7 to 8% a year will actually be quite lucrative. And that's just my personal game plan. It's obviously not financial advice. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, come to your own conclusions. But that's it. Like I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's my estimation. So hope you enjoyed this market update, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.